It's a pleasure to serve under your chair, and I congratulate the member for bringing this debate, and indeed for an excellent speech. I concur with him on the future possibilities. The minor comment meant as an assistance rather than a chastisement is the pronunciation of the wind farms actually Kincardine. But he's not from these parts and wasn't to know, but I fully agree. Scotland is 60% of the UK's onshore wind. It is 25% of Europe's offshore wind capacity. It's not simply the Celtic Sea, it's all around Scotland's shores. Berwick Bank, a field between East Lothian, my constituency, and Fife, is able to power something like 2 million households. Scotland only has 2.4 million. That is one field alone. So the potential is significant. It follows on from oil and gas and precedes, as has been mentioned, tidal possibilities and even carbon capture and storage. So our country has been blessed with huge natural resource. It is a significant blessing. And yet Scotland is energy rich, yet Scots are fuel poor. It's no comfort to be able to see turbines turning, if they are, onshore or offshore, if you cannot heat your home, if you cannot power your business, if you cannot obtain employment. And that's why we have to ask, where are our country and our communities' benefit and resource? I appreciate that there is a disconnect that has to be resolved. Scotland has more energy than it requires, as I mentioned with the Berwick Bank field. England has a surfeit of requirement, but not the ability to access that energy, and therefore cabling makes sense. But where is the consequent payment? Where are the jobs? Because at the present moment, they are simply not coming. The turbines are going to be constructed, but sadly, almost all not in Scotland. Every yard in Scotland should be clanging and riveting. Every estuary in Scotland should be producing it. But we're bringing them from south of the border. We're bringing them from the Netherlands. We're bringing them from Indonesia, apparently. Where is the work for our people? Because it's not evident in my constituency or indeed across the country. The transmission stations are also correctly being built. I have one near Torness that will take the cabling south to Redcar. A similar one is going from Peterhead down to Drax. But where is the consequent payment and compensation for Scotland losing the energy from our shores? Where is the money that we should be entitled to? It's simply coming in and going on, and I get told it's supply chain jobs. I spoke to Scottish Power. The transmission station will employ 4 people in my constituency. 4 people. That is an inadequate return. It's simply unacceptable. We accept cabling, but there has to be compensation, and it cannot simply be a few pounds for the Crown estate. It has to be to the communities, and it has to be to the country as a whole. And it's not simply, as I say, the cabling, because the Berwick Bank field has seen 40%, although it's in the Scottish territorial waters, although it lies between East Lothian and Fife, 40% is going to be cabled directly south to Blyth. Crown estates won't even get any benefit. The Scottish Government, Marine Scotland, the councils, the communities, Crown Estate Scotland, nobody is getting any financial recompense, and that simply cannot be right. It has to be addressed. By all means.
For giving way, because in fact he's hitting something that's really important here, and that is community benefit. In Shetland and in Orkney, for the last 40 years, we have derived real community benefit from the presence of offshore oil and gas in our communities. And it would be an absolute scandal if the next generation of clean, renewable energy is something from which we cannot get the same benefit. Does he agree with me, though, that it is rather perplexing that when the ScotWind round of leasing was facilitated, there was a cap of £100,000 per square kilometre put on bids in that auction? To the life of me, I just don't understand why that was necessary, and it is a real missed opportunity. Scotland's seabed has been sold cheap.
Well, I think it has. I think the member quite correctly raises 2 issues. He raises the benefit of community benefit that there should be, and I pay tribute to Mr Clark, Shetland Islands Council, who negotiated that. Anybody who goes to Shetland sees the community benefit. East Lothian would give a scythe teeth for that. That community benefit should apply not simply in Scotland, not simply in Scottish Islands, it should apply across the UK. There should be a community benefit at a very low rate that wouldn't be a disincentive to investment, but it should be available for communities. With regard to the ScotWind project, yes, bulk of my criticism, because energy is overwhelmingly reserved, is against the UK government, but the ScotWind auction has been frankly lamentable. Nobody goes into an auction, in my experience, whether it's a fundraiser for a political party, and puts a cap on an auction. Normally you put a floor on an auction, but for some reason the Scottish Government decided to put a cap on the auction. They returned the benefit of £700 million, which they crowed as being great benefit to Scotland. And of course £700 million is better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. But of course, 1 month later, New York had the New York bite. They put up for auction 1/4 of what was disposed in Scotland, and they obtained $4.3 billion. I think the Scottish Government has to answer for their incompetence, as the UK Government has to answer for their failures. There are opportunities. There should be employment in Scotland. There should be energy storage, because that is now coming on shore with battery. So we should be able to keep stuff in Scotland. We should be able to manufacture hydrogen, green hydrogen, not blue hydrogen. In my constituency, what do you require for oxygen, for hydrogen? In the main, water and energy. We have that by the score. So there has to be more. This is a huge potential and benefit that has landed in Scotland and in its communities. But at the present moment, both by failures of the Scottish Government, but primarily by failures of the UK Government, we are not seeing that benefit in terms of employment. We are not seeing it in terms of a share being taken, because it is ours, and we should be taking a share. It is absurd, as another member mentioned, that Vattenfall and the Chinese National Corporation are in fact owners, and yet our people aren't. This potential has to be for the benefit of our country, the benefit of our communities. The government has to up its game, and indeed, so to devolve governance.
Macquarie.